Good morning, everyone. My name is William Bloom. I am the Sports and Outdoor Sales Manager with the Louisiana Office of Tourism. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today for our latest webinar session with the Sports Tourism Series. This webinar session has been brought to you by the Louisiana Office of Tourism. And today's topic is preparation for NCAA Collegiate sports bids. Before we dive into this presentation, I do want to remind everyone that we have an excellent educational webinar series with past webinars, educational sessions, and trainings that touch upon any and everything within our industry and across different industries as well. So please take a screenshot of the current slide, go to that landing page and view those past webinar experiences, as well as also register for future webinars to come in the coming weeks and months. So today, to bring our presentation full circle, we've invited a featured guest. Today we have with us Mr. Russ Yurk with 129 Sports. He's the president and CEO. Russ is also a sports industry professional that holds nearly 3 decades of experience within the sports tourism industry, including a wide range of sporting events and also working with a number of governing bodies. Russ has a wealth of experience in event management and project development on the international side, intercollegiate, national, and state levels. This past year, he managed the site selection process for the NCAA championship bid cycle and is continuing those efforts by helping the NCAA with several bonus bidding opportunities for 2021 events. Russ has also worked with organizations such as the World Rowing Championships, USA Baseball, as well as he'll help organize the 2021 World Baseball Softball Confederation 18-year Baseball World Cup, among others. He was recently named Special Projects Coordinator for Sports ETA to oversee events rights holders relationships on behalf of the Sports ETA organization in an effort to increase those relationships with Sports ETA memberships. As a state, last year we were able to acquire some of those NCAA bids over the last bid cycle, but Russ is here to help us prepare for the next bid cycle to capture more opportunity for Louisiana communities, as well as for our NCAA institutions throughout the state. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and give it to Russ. But before I give it to Russ, I do want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, please enter your questions within the chat box and we will address them towards the end of the presentation. And let me go ahead and hop out. And without further ado, Mr. Russ Yurk, everyone.
Hey guys, good morning. Thanks, Will. When you say 3 decades, that makes it sound a lot longer than it really should be. But no, I appreciate you guys having me. I know some of you, Will and I have had some conversations. I am sort of native by marriage. My wife's from Baton Rouge. I got married in Baton Rouge, so definitely have a soft spot for all of you guys down there. So I've got a presentation that we'll run through rather quickly, kind of walking you through where we've been the last couple of years, kind of talk about the last bid cycle for those of you that maybe weren't as involved, and then really want to start looking ahead. The timing of this really is great. You know, once a bid cycle opens, right, we're moving 1,000,000 miles an hour. And this is really the time for you guys to start laying some of that groundwork locally and start really mapping out your plan for what will, you know, it'll be on our doorstep before we know it. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we can jump in to the presentation. All right, everybody see my presentation? Are we good?
We're good.
All right, awesome. So preparation for future NCAA bids, as Will did a much better job of describing my background, but for those of you that I don't know well, yeah, I'm a former NCAA staff member. I worked in the championships group from 2004 to 2012, led the NCAA bid process in 19 and 20, and then have continued on, as Will mentioned, just a lot of adjustments and with COVID forced changes to the way the NCAA normally does their site selections in an academic year. So let's take a look at the last bid cycle. So the last bid cycle wrapped up. 86 of the 90 NCAA championships were included in that in some portion. So anything that is traditionally a predetermined site is included in that, with the exception of men's Final Four was not part of the process. So that included not only final sites, but some preliminary round locations. We've fulfilled sites for the 22-23 academic year through 25-26. So we're, like a lot of us, right? We're sort of living in the future. You got the 20-year calendar in your desk. And when we started out, we were looking to fill right around 500 sites. So timeline, late August of 2019, the bid portal opened. Many of you probably saw me out and about throughout 2019 and even into 2020, doing as much outreach as I can. So I hit all the major trade shows, the Connects and the sports ETAs of the world, any state-based associations like yours, and really just try to spread the word, help educate, and really assist in the process. My job and my role has a lot of responsibilities, but one of them was to help you guys put your best foot forward, to help you put your very best bids together for the process. And honestly, we're kind of starting that right now, right? I want to help you guys put your best bids forward in the next bid cycle. Later in 2019, we hosted a symposium at the NCAA, and this wasn't the first time they've hosted the symposium. But one change that I made is I essentially created almost like a mini trade show. We had every championship manager available, so it was a full day of activities. Those of you that were there, we started with breakfast, had some presentations. We had a lot of breakouts, right? So either was sports specific, if it was some of the larger championships. Hey, I want to learn about Frozen Four. I want to learn about Final Four. Or some other kind of nuts and bolts pieces, right? I need help with my budget. How do I put a budget in? Things like that. But making the champ managers available gave everyone the opportunity to just go up and talk about the sport. And I think that's one piece, not only at the symposium, but between now and the next bid cycle, is using those champ managers as a resource, to kind of figure out what's going to make you stand out. So go through the timeline. Bids were due early February 2020. Timing for us was pretty good, right? The world kind of came to an end a little bit, if you will, a few weeks after that. And then we announced sites last October. So we're about, I guess, 7 months past the announcement. So what did it look like all in at the end? So we received over 3,000 bids. 46 states plus Washington, D.C. were included in that. And then in the end, we awarded about 460 sites. D1 and D3 cross-country regionals were pulled out for a couple of variety of reasons. So still quite a bit of championship sites that were awarded. So where do those bids come from, right? So here are our top bid submitters. You can see Las Vegas at the top. So with the wider acceptance of legalized sports wagering, the landscape in the country obviously is significantly different than it's been over the last 5, 10, 15 years. So Las Vegas was able to formally submit bids for the first time, and they went all in, right? 101 bids. But you'll see there is really a cross section of different size cities, right? We've got some big professional level cities, we've got some mid-sized markets, and we got some smaller towns, right? A Stockton or a Salem. And we'll circle back to Salem probably a couple of times, but it really, there's no kind of right recipe, or there's no right size to submit bids. All told, from the state of Louisiana, there were 25 bids submitted in the last cycle. And guys, I will make sure that Will has this presentation, so we can make sure we can distribute it after the fact. So who's hosting, right? Who were the big winners, right? So Orlando came in with 16, Indianapolis had 15, Salem had 15, little Salem, Virginia was on the list. And then for you all, Baton Rouge came in with 2. So who were the people that ended up getting those bids? So 213 different NCAA members received at least a single bid. And when I say member, obviously typically that's going to be an institution, but can also be a conference office. They are eligible hosts, if you will, as well. And 76 what I'll call local organizing organizations, right? I know that's a little bit redundant, but it's really a cross section. So obviously CVB, sports commissions were the lion's share of those folks, but venues, like a professional level arena has submitted bids. We've had some agencies submit and get bids. and even a resort. I think that was for one of the golf championships, was an LOC for that. So that could, what a LOC can be made up of really a variety of different types of organizations as long as there is an NCAA member institution. So institution or conference connected to that bid. So Baton Rouge is going to be hosting a D1 men's golf regional in 2024 and women's gymnastics regional in 2026. So that's what's coming to you guys locally as we kind of work our way through the next 4-year cycle. So what are some of the selection factors, right? So when I was on staff and even to this day, kind of if you had to boil down, like what is like your goal every single day you walk through these doors? It's a student athlete experience. How can we impact, so what we're talking about right here is really through the championship experience, but that really carries through to all the departments. How can we make this what is in many cases going to be a once in a lifetime experience, win or lose, when they get to the championship site? And let me just clarify. So when we say championship site at the NCAA, that could be 2, that could be 4, it could be 8, basically however many teams get to that final location. So if there's, let's say D2 basketball has an Elite 8, that's the championship, or if there's 4. So final site is what we'll refer to as championship. So student athlete experience. So drilling down, what does that really mean? So, probably first and foremost, your game venue and your facilities. Do you guys have, what it takes to host an NCAA championship? The goal is typically to we want these student athletes to play in as nice or nicer facilities than they've played in throughout their season. We want it to be memorable. I want their eyes to kind of bug out a little bit, when they show up. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. Some of the things that the NCAA helps with, right? Signage and all of that. We want them to walk in and realize immediately, whoa, wait a minute, this is different, right? We maybe we advanced through a bracket, we won a regional, but there's a whole different level here. Again, that student athlete experience. Next thing is your proposed budget and your costs. Even pre-pandemic, the NCAA is like any place else, right? There are budgets that we have to live within. So with your bid is proposed budget is submitted along with that. And we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. So that is one factor. And then cost. So one thing that we do kind of on the back end is we look at travel costs. What is it going to cost for us to get 2 teams or 4 teams or 8 teams to your location? And what are your hotel costs, right? Is this a high cost location, right? Are we in a big city? Is it a tough time of year? For you guys, right? I'm not sure the timing would ever work out this way, but we wouldn't want to host a championship in New Orleans around Mardi Gras, right? Just room availability non-existent, rates are crazy. We run into it with graduations, and then just other, towns have festivals, and we're always like, hey, do you have a citywide convention going on? Those types of things that may drive those hotel costs up definitely come into play. Geographic location is one. So what's your proximity to traditional participants? That can be a couple of different ways, right? So looking at it from a sport perspective, I'm not going to probably recommend an ice hockey championship for you guys, right? It just, it's not a traditional sport down there. I know kids are playing it coast to coast, but probably not a great selection for you guys. Or let's say Division III. I know you guys have a couple of D3 schools in your state. But for the most part, the membership's Northeast, heavy Northeast, a little Midwest, those types of things. Hey, is it a good fit geographically? And then climate, and really this is more driven kind of in the fall sports. Your soccers, your field hockeys of the world, they're having their championships in, let's say, mid-November through mid-December, which isn't to say a soccer hasn't been in more of a colder weather location. But I had Division II soccer, and we're going to kind of use that as an example as we go throughout. I ended up in Florida several times with that championship. So again, early December, even a chilly day in Florida is probably a better day than here in Indianapolis, right, where we could get snow. And then a little lagniappe, right? What can you guys throw in with what's special about your community that can kind of make it a unique experience? When they walk away, obviously we want them to have had a great experience, great venues, hopefully great competitions, all of those types of things. We want them to remember the whole experience, right? When we got to the hotel had this, they had cool signage, key cards, right? Things that we take for granted that are really easy and fun things for an 18 to 22-year-old that may not have seen that before. And it doesn't have to be expensive. It just we want to make sure when they walk through the door that they know that people know they're there, why they're there, and that they're there to have hopefully have a good time. So looking ahead, so with everything that's going on right now with COVID, the next bid cycle dates are TBD. What I can tell you is right now, staff honestly is they're living kind of week to week right now, trying to get through the championship season. So there's a big finish line for them in June that they can kind of exhale and then take another big deep breath. But if we were to stay on the same schedule and the same format, and I really want to emphasize if, what we'd be looking at is bids would open in fall of 2023, and we'd award those bids in the fall of 2024. Right now, again, we haven't had any formal conversations around that, but we felt that the schedule, the times of year, and we built this around championship schedules and things like that, giving us a longer runway, right? More opportunities for me to be out and about to do these types of outreach, whether it be webinar or in person trade shows. It really worked the last time, so I think this is direction we're heading. And then when we do get there and we do open the gates for the next bid cycle, you're going to be looking at the 26-27 school year through 29-30, right? So right now, again, it seems way down the road, but as we know, those dates will be on top of us before we know it. So what are some of the reasons to host? And I know we've got a cross section of DMOs, we've got a cross section of our campus folks. So there are more than this, but these are kind of the top ones, right? Promote your city or your campus, right? We all like to show, let's showcase our facilities, right? I know when I was on staff, somebody builds a brand new building, a brand new aquatic center, brand new track. You kind of want to show it off, right? Look at this really great thing that we just added. Same thing, you guys are trying to promote your cities. Um, a lot of campuses are the same way. Even though you're just bringing essentially other college students, it does shine a light on your campus. Everything at a minimum, every final site is available via webcast. Obviously, the NCAA's partners of through Turner, CBS, ESPN. There's opportunity to have national television there. Everybody loves that kind of that earned media or that extra opportunity to be seen on a national stage. For those of you on campus, service to fellow NCAA members. The NCAA is, at the end of the day, it's an association. And without your help, without your committee service, without your hosting of championships, these things don't happen. So, that's part of it. Fill some hotel rooms, right? At the end of the day, I know occupancy is still growing and hopefully getting back to pre-pandemic levels. Depending on the championship, we can help do that, right? Between not only our teams, our officials, mom and dad, and so on and so forth. Supporting the sport. We'll talk a little bit later, but some sports don't get just dozens and dozens of bids, right? So for the D1 golfs of the world out there, where everybody just, we can't, we've got unlimited number of bids. It feels like there are other sports, there are Olympic sports, for example, that don't. And we'll talk about that, but the assumption sometimes is, man, every sport's going to get 10, 20, 30, 40 bids, and that is absolutely not the case. And then back for the folks on campus, competitive advantage. When I was on staff at the NCAA, the bid process was very haphazard. Each NCAA committee would sort of decide, hey, let's go out 2 more years. And it was kind of all over the place. And it was a little bit of this perpetual bids. There was always something out for bid. But even when we pull it into a cycle, those first couple of years of the bids, Stanford actually does this. Stanford makes the coaches an active participant in their decision on what to bid on. Hey, I've got a great freshman class, and I am feeling really good about where these kids are going to be in 2025, right? That's part of it. People are sort of hedging their bets. I would love to play for a national championship in my building, on my campus, in my hometown. And I've seen that firsthand. I had men's volleyball as one of my championship sports, and Stanford actually hosted, and they had a class that went from, I think, 2-28 their first year. They were just horrible to winning a national championship in that group's senior year. It was a really great story. So there is a competitive advantage to hosting. And there are others, but these are, the ones that really jump off the page for folks. So let me jump into what I'd like to call the hosting myths, right? What are the barriers that I typically hear from people of, this is, oh, we'd love to, but, right? So these are really the three big things that I hear, not only as a staff member back in the day, but throughout the bid process. Um, NCAA events, they're just too big for us. We'll lose money and it's too much work. So guys, let me dig into this a little bit. NCAA events are too big for us. Um, I think to a certain level there's an intimidation by the logo, right? When people say NCAA, it's a big organization. It is, right? 1,100 member schools, and sometimes it's put in that class with the NFL and Major League Baseball, and in some ways, right, it kind of is. I guess March Madness can kind of live in that level, but we have 90 championships in Olympic sports up through men's Final Four, women's Final Four. There one line that I tried to convey during the bid process is I think there's a championship for every community. And I had a few phone calls. People actually would sort of quote that back to me. And there were a couple of times I was like, "Ooh, Russ, I wish I hadn't said that." But we sort of talked it through, and we found a facility. And it definitely wasn't a guarantee of receiving a championship, but I think every community, especially those of you that are taking the time out of your day to join us this morning, that could host an NCAA championship. So let's look at our friends in Salem, Virginia. The gang there, they are tremendous. They've really kind of crafted their niche in the D3 world. They've hosted others, but they really made D3 their bread and butter. As you saw on a slide earlier today, they were awarded 15 championships last cycle. Same number as Indianapolis, right here where I live, where they're guaranteed a Final Four every 4 years, right? And right out the NCAA's back door, Salem, Virginia had the same number. With those 15 championships in the next cycle, they'll pass the 100 championships hosted mark, and go beyond that, right? So they're getting ready to hit their kind of the 100th championship. Now, Salem, Virginia is not even the biggest town in their metro area, right? They've got about 25,000 people. Roanoke's, I think, right around 100,000, but they've figured out who they are, what they have. They've got a really unique combination there between their CVB folks and really Parks and Rec is how they put their LOC together, and they do a tremendous job. So, let's take a step back. There are some championships that are huge, right? They're monsters. They go to big cities, but let's talk about a typical team championship. And when I say team, that's going to be like your soccer's and field hockeys of the world versus individual team, which would be track and field, swimming and diving, something like that. So your typical team championship, you're going to bring in 4 to 8 teams, right? Maybe 2 to 4 competition days. So let's go to our D2 soccer example. When I had D2 soccer, and it was a combined, and still is a combined championship. So we're bringing 8 teams to town. They have 2 competition days, and I've got a slide a little bit later that'll kind of walk us through that. Um, and when I go to trade shows, usually one of the first questions is, how many fields do you need, right? Thinking youth tournaments and things like that, where we need this, as far as the eye can see, fields. D2 soccer needs 1 game field. D3 soccer needs one game field. There are other pieces that you need to build around that, but these are very manageable events to host. And honestly, I would argue in some ways they're probably easier events to host than those really humongous youth tournaments where they're coming in for 3 or 4 days and you've got 100 plus teams and there's a lot of moving parts. Next thing I hear is we're going to lose money. Russ, I can't. My AD, my president, I can't lose money. So as I mentioned earlier, as a part of your bid, you submit a proposed budget, and I know some of you have on the call have done this a million times. So this actually, guys, this is an actual championship host site soccer bid from, I want to say, maybe about 4 years ago, and honestly I can't remember if this is D2 or D3. And I know it's a little bit small, but I want to highlight a couple of things. So very top, right, receipts and expenditures. When this was submitted, they budgeted for right around 16,500 in ticket revenue and just under 69,000 in expenses. Okay, so first off, that's going to jump off your page. You're like, whoa, that's a huge difference. Yeah, NCAA championships, of the 90 championships, 80-ish lose money. And even those that might break even in this scenario, this doesn't account for travel, all of those types of things. So part of what the NCAA exists to do is to host championships. So that seeing that type of deficit, that's what we expect to see. Actual. So at the end of the event, right? They put in their actuals. They did a great job. More than doubled what they expected in receipts. Expenses were just a tick below what they budgeted for, which is perfect, right? They lived within their budget. I'll kind of spare you all the math on the right hand side, but that deficit right around $26,000. There's a small honorarium when you host an NCAA championship. In this case, it was $2,900, right? It's not something you're going to get rich from. But the most important thing I want you all to see, and I've highlighted in red, is line 10. Okay, amount to be sent to host agency, and in this case, once all the math was completed, the host kept the gate. The NCAA sent a check for $29,621 and some change. So the and again, the funny thing is I hear this a lot is we'll lose money. If hosting a championship was a money losing proposition, at the end of the day, nobody would host. So what I can tell you is you're not going to lose money when you host a championship. If we were able to drill down on this screen and look at your expenditures, there's a staffing. So on the staffing front, right? Hey, I've got to bring in my PA guy, my music guy. I need custodial or ground staff. All that's built into that. So any of those extra costs above and beyond are built into your budget, and the NCAA takes care of that on the back end. And this is a very basic. Some bigger championships for those of you in the bigger markets that might go after a D1 women's volleyball, a Frozen Four, obviously a D1 men's or women's basketball. It's a little bit different structure. There's some guarantees involved, and I'm definitely happy to talk offline about those. But like I said, the 80-ish other championships, this is what you're going to see. And it's too much work. We talked about it a minute ago, right? The D2 soccer championship, 8 teams, 4-4. Here's what the schedule would look like, right? Kind of in a non-COVID world when we're not bringing folks in early for testing and all of that. But teams arrive on a Tuesday, practice and banquet on Wednesday, and practices in this scenario they're like 55 minutes, right? We're churning teams through. So this is where having a couple of extra practice fields. Maybe it's a secondary lacrosse field. It's a field hockey field. It's whatever the case may be, to work your way through the practice day. Thursday, 4 semifinals, right? So for me in Division II soccer, it was 11, 2, 5, and 8, one day, right? We did 4 games back to back. Those can get kind of long because, as you guys know, the first game's absolutely going to go to overtime and penalty kicks and totally mess up your schedule, right? But 4 games. Friday adds another practice day, so now we're down just to the 4 teams remaining, the 2 and 2, and then Saturday 2 championship games. So again, compared to a youth tournament where you're bringing in hundreds of teams, this is really, really manageable. A joint championship like this, you throw in, the travel parties, the NCAA committee, your game officials, you're probably talking 275 people. At the end of the day, it's not an unreasonable number. And frankly, really very manageable. So along those lines, so there's a ton of support when you host an NCAA championship. Obviously, there's an NCAA championship manager that is your point person, essentially, really from the day you get the bid all the way through the execution of the championship. So he or she is there. Typically, what you would see is once a championship year is completed, so let's say this was a normal year, championships are over in May, some trickle a little bit into June. That's when I would do my fall site visits, right? So for my soccer site visit, I'd probably knock that out in, let's say, July, and then kind of August, September, knock out the rest of the site visits, right? So that's when you're really going to start getting going with your champ manager. But every championship has a host manual. The D2 soccer host manual, I think, is 95 or 96 pages, which can sound overwhelming, but when you break it down, it really gives you that full roadmap of everything, right? A to Z, soup to nuts. What do I need to do to host this championship? They built in some really nice sort of event week checklists, right? Hey, before teams get here, this is what I need to do. On the hotel front, via the NCAA's partner Anthony Travel, hotels are handled, right? There are definitely some recommendations from you locally, whether it's your DMO or on campus. Hey, we usually work with these 2 properties. They get team travel. Perfect. Those are the places we want to know. They understand bus parking and feeding athletes and all that. But Anthony Travel will handle the rest of that. They'll handle the contracting and all of that. The NCAA will provide the equipment, right? So the basic things, right? Balls, pucks, soccer, the little pennies they wear on the sidelines, all that's provided. The sideline equipment, right? The water jugs, the ice chest, all that stuff is sent ahead. All that stuff stays. The awards, signage, they'll send you all the signage that you're going to need. Marketing support, and there's a lot of marketing support. I just threw a couple down here, but graphics, logos. Hey, you need a 30-second video spot that you want to put on your website, or maybe you have a video board, maybe a 15-second radio spot. NCAA can do all that for you. Game scripts, all of those things are handled as well. So, it very much is not the case where it's like, hey, Will, here's your championship, congratulations. Make sure this is knocked out. I'll see you in 3 years. You've got a partner right there, hand in hand, walking you through the process to put on a great championship for the student athletes. So looking ahead, I've been asked on a couple of occasions, typically more with DMO focused groups, is what should I be doing right now? First, guys, is continue to cultivate and strengthen your relationships. So those of you at CVBs and Sports Commission, get with your campus folks. And when I say campus, really cast that wider net, right? Make sure you're in connection with the athletic director, university president. Some university presidents, I mean, they can't wait to get NCAA championships on their campus. Again, it gives them a chance to highlight and show off all that they've got, all that they have to offer, things like that. And coaches, guys, don't forget about the coaches. They also can be a resource for you locally through their own experiences, right? Hey, I've been in the championship. Here's what they did in Salem, Virginia. It made them really stand out. They're going to go to their coaches association conventions. Maybe they're serving on an NCAA committee, right? Maybe they're part of the group that's going to make the decision of, hey, where are we going? Same with your conference offices. On the flip side, I often hear, hey, from sports commissions, CVBs, we want to help, but our campus just doesn't, they don't want any part of it. And so for our campus folks, I would definitely, if you aren't engaging with your CVB or sports commission, I definitely encourage you to do so. They are an extra set of hands that can help you. They have resources. They have access to volunteers, and they can help you with the marketing effort. They can help you with the banquet. And I mean, there's so many different things that the perfect relationship is kind of that 50-50, and there's no right recipe for that. I've had championships where the sports commission essentially did 100% of the work. The campus basically kind of stamped their name on it, said, yeah, we're host, but don't call us if you need anything, right? Definitely not the ideal way we would like to see it done. I've seen it the other direction where the campus takes on 98% of the work. There's no right recipe. It's whatever works best in your community. But I definitely encourage you guys to collaborate and work together because you each have something to offer the other. And at the end of the day, it's going to help you guys reach your goals, right? Highlighting your campuses, your communities, and you're going to be able to deliver that championship experience that's going to be memorable. And then hopefully, right? Hey, this was awesome. Baton Rouge was awesome. Thibodeau was awesome. We got to come back in the next bid cycle. We got to make sure they get a good look. So research those sports of interest. The NCAA site can be a little unmanageable sometimes. There's a lot of info out there, but a quick Google search, you should be able to find it. If not, let me know. But hey, the sports that you were interested in, who got them? Who got them this last go around? Dig into the cities, dig into the facilities. What made them stand out? Um, I would reach out, right? I think that's the great collaboration that I see in the travel and tourism community is the willingness to help other locations. Watch or attend a future championship. Obviously we kind of get through COVID, is visit and see what's going on. Reach out to the NCAA championship manager. I highly encourage this, even right now through the next bid cycle, is reach out to him or her, talk to them. What are you guys looking for? Here's what we have, is a good fit, those types of things. And same thing, talk to your coaches. They're the ones on the ground, they're the ones competing. What would stand out to them? What do they want to see? And use them as a resource. And review the previous bid specs. At my request, all of the bid specs, the final site bid specs from the last bid cycle are still online, and I've asked that they remain online as a resource. So if you were to go to ncaa.org/bids, big graphic on the front, scroll down a little bit below that, and you'll see all the bid specs from the bid cycle. Um, Use those as a resource. Kind of here's a checklist. Hey, here's what they were looking for. Could there be changes? There could be, of course, but I would say typically from year to year, or even from 5 years, they're going to change very, very little, right? There's going to be tweaks. There's going to be some little things. Any big changes typically are for the better, right? Maybe more teams are in the bracket, or we're bringing more teams to the final site. But most of those are going to be really small changes, and give you a good sense of what would be needed for a bid. Target those bids or those championships that make sense for your community or campus. Is that sport a priority at your host school? Again, kind of making the ice hockey, right? Again, ice hockey probably not a great fit for Louisiana. Is it played locally? Those are big things. And sports sponsorship. Again, I'll make sure that Will has a copy of this presentation. But if you were to click on that link, you'll be taken to this page, and there's a number of different filters on the left-hand side. Um, you know, you can use this 6 different ways from Sunday, but one of them is by sport and by division, and it gives you a chance to really kind of filter out. Well, hey, I'm really interested in D3 soccer, even D2 soccer. Um, you know, any NCAA institution can host an NCAA championship. They do not have to be in the same division. So if you wanted to take a run at Division 2 or Division 3 soccer and have maybe one of your D1 schools as host, that is absolutely positively in play to do that. So, there's, we can color outside the lines a little bit on a number of these. So, right here today, lower left-hand corner, there's just a little over 1,100 schools. Throw conferences in there, we're rolling up closer to 1,200 members. So, feel free to play with this and make it work for you guys. So looking ahead, don't assume and dig deeper into these. Use me as a resource to champ managers. In the last cycle, right? I'm going to try not bury you guys with too many numbers, but of the 86 championships that went out for bid, 21 of those, so almost a quarter of those, averaged 5 bids or fewer per year, right? D3 men's basketball in 2024, 3 bids. Basketball, right? Everybody's got a gym, right? A small arena, those types of things. Regionals. I think one area that I tried to stress and maybe the message didn't resonate as much is regional. So Division 3 men's and women's cross country regionals, they average 5 bids per year. Well, they have 8 regions each year. So what that means is, right, there are slots we didn't fill, and regionals are really a great opportunity for maybe a smaller market or a newer market that hasn't hosted before or hasn't hosted in a long time. You're not competing against a nationwide, landscape, right? And that nationwide, like in D3 men's basketball, might have been 3, but hey, D2 cross country regionals, D3, they need sites in these different pockets of the country. Now you've really narrowed that field down to just a small number. So definitely don't overlook hosting regional events. Cross country is a nice one to bring in, right? There's a lot of athletes. It's a short stay, but they usually bring in a nice little hotel pickup. And again, not really a great fit for you guys, but Division 3 men's ice hockey in 23, 24, and 25, they had 1 bid each year. So, just trying to reinforce that same message that, hey, every championship isn't getting 20 or 25 bids. Sometimes that competitive landscape, it might be 3 or 4 or 4 or 5. So if you're thinking about it, definitely give it a run is the message that I've got for you guys. And kind of the last thing is think about this when considering new facilities. Whether it's on campus, which is probably an easier place, but for the DMOs, the sports commissions, and CVBs as youth facilities, and there's still kind of that arms race out there for facilities being built. Think about that. Use those bid specs. Call the champ manager. Call me, and find out what we need. Right. I do a little work for a sports commission down in Florida, and I stumbled onto a clip file article about a new multi-sport facility. Right, fields, courts, all that. They were going to be built to NCAA specs. The fact that your court's the right size or your field is the right size is fantastic, right? But what the NCAA needs is infrastructure. Um, they need bleachers, right? And for let's go back to D2 soccer. Those Thursday semifinals, it might just be mom and dad, right? I'm putting 75 people in there, maybe up to a few hundred. So again, we're not talking large numbers, but we need that. We need a press box. Um, we need locker rooms. In many cases, outdoor sport, right? We got to get out of the weather. We got to get out of the lightning, things like that. Those are the things that, built to NCAA specs. Make sure you cast that wider net and making sure you're understanding all the things that would go into that, right? Is there a sports training room? Where am I going to put my game officials? If that championship is selected for drug testing, where's a private spot with a restroom that I can do that? That I think is what's being missed out there in the arms race with youth sports facilities. It's awesome. You've got 25 soccer fields, great for tournaments, but if you don't have that stadium field, that field with lights, that's where you're going to have, some problems. Like I said, and just review the past bid specs. So, guys, I'm going to pause there, and that's kind of my piece. Open it up for questions, and honestly, guys, everything's on the table. Please, fire away.
Hey Russ, I have a couple of questions that were submitted directly to me.
Okay.
The first one, does a host destination need to have an NCAA institution within their destination, their community?
Great question. And they do not. Um, we have a few odd occasions here and there. Emory University in Atlanta has, and I think will in the future, host a golf championship in Florida.
Hmm.
Division One ice hockey, I think Wisconsin's helping somebody several 100,000 miles away. So definitely not. We've seen again long distances, but if you're looking in your city, your county, and there's an institution the next county or 2 or 3 counties away, not a problem at all.
That's awesome. Next question. Do you see the addition of more sports disciplines in future years with the NCAA?
On the women's side, there's an emerging sports list, right? And beach volleyball is the most current and best example of that. Women's, they called it sand at the time, was on the emerging sports list. Um, it's hard to say. You're seeing in pockets of the country, I'm seeing girls wrestling right at the high school level. I don't know if there's anything that's immediate. The last two championships that have been added was women's beach and then Division III men's volleyball. It brought us up to 90. Great question. I'm not sure if there's anything imminent here in the next few years, especially coming out of COVID. But the NCAA is definitely responsive to that as they see sports emerge. And again, it's a membership-driven organization. If the sponsorship's there and the desire is there, yeah, they absolutely would add a 91st championship. I'm not sure what it would be or if there's a realistic timeline at this point.
All right, next question. Can institutions host championships together?
Yes, absolutely. Our friends in Chattanooga, they did a really nice job this last bid cycle and landed a number of championships. And I don't want to. They did Lee University and another one, and I apologize that I can't remember. But yeah, absolutely, they had a nice model that they did have two institutions serve as co-hosts, if you will. So that absolutely is in play.
Next questions. Can you host an NCAA event even if the host institution helping is an NAIA institution?
That one would be a deal breaker right there. So you would need an NCAA member. So again, an institution or conference. Um, I'm trying to think of an example. I suppose you could use an NCAA, or I'm sorry, an NAI institution as your host location, kind of as your venue, if you will. But you would still need an NCAA member to serve as host. So in that case, it'd be like some of the bigger championships, right, using pro level arenas, right? So they're off campus facilities, but you still need that NCAA member connected to the bid. Uh, I'm not familiar with that having happened, um, but again, I think everything's on the table.
Is it beneficial for cities to submit bids to host multiple events at the same time? For example, host D2 and D3 events, same sports over the same time frame.
Um, you know, yes, I think the short answer is yes on that. And let me go with a couple of different explanations there. The biggest thing, you'd have to make sure that their date formulas are the same. And there are some cases they are. Um, there are some cases they are not. So just making sure that, let's say you're looking at a uh, D2 and D3 soccer, right? Are they competing on the same weekends? Lacrosse does that right now. Traditionally, at the final site, men's lacrosse um, typically rotates, honestly, mid-Atlantic, right? They're kind of from a Baltimore, Philly up to DC or Foxborough. They'll bring in the championship games for D2 men's lacrosse and D3 men's lacrosse. So you can look at it a couple of different ways, um, depending on what fits the best. Is, hey, do we look at maybe all three from the same gender, or do we look at both D2 men and women? Um, and yes, so that absolutely is an option. Those are things where you'll want to have a conversation with the champ managers. Um, and like anything, right? So everything at the NCAA is governed by a committee, right? So all 90 championships, there are 90 sport committees that govern those championships. People change, ideas change, all those types of things. So what maybe wasn't a great idea to them 2 years ago, in 2 years in the future, it might be a great idea. So yeah, that absolutely is in play, but that's one where you'd want to stay close to the champ manager and make sure that both groups were open to it before you spend a lot of time digging into it. What I will add as an aside is at the Division II level, Division II hosts what they call their sports festival. So in a 4-year bid cycle, there'll be a fall, a winter, and a spring festival where they'll bring all their sports together to a single location. And I was fortunate to be a part of two of those when I was on staff, two fall festivals with Division II. Um, if you think you're capable of hosting one of those, I would highly recommend doing it. Those do not get a lot of bids, and the plus side for you is let's look at a fall, right? You're going to bring in both men's and women's soccer, cross country, women's volleyball. I can't remember, maybe a field hockey. So you're bringing multiple sports together, and those teams are also permitted to stay longer. So at an NCAA championship, right? You come in, you practice on Wednesday, you play your semifinal on Thursday. If you lose, you got to go home. Well, in a festival setting, your per diem and everything, you're allowed to stay through the weekend. So now there's even more room nights for you to fill. And like I said, those are a little bit more challenging um, events to find hosts for. Again, there's a lot of moving parts that go with that, but it's a really cool event. Student athletes go support each other at their different locations. Um, and so that would be one way to host multiple events kind of within an existing structure.
Gotcha. Russ, we actually have a very active group. I have three
Awesome.
more questions right now.
Absolutely. No,
um, when a championship bid is awarded, is that final or can they be replaced or removed before the event takes place?
the it's final unless there is something that bubbles up. Um, how do I say this legislatively? Um, there was a situation in North Carolina 2015, 2016. They passed a bathroom bill and some things like that. So obviously, there's some other pieces of legislation out there at various stages in different states. But for the most part, once you're awarded, um, you're awarded unless something, catastrophic happens, right? Something happens to your facility. Um, guys, schools close. Schools do go out of business. It's rare, but it does happen. But no, typically it's yours, and depending on what year you're awarded, you may have 5 or almost 6 years in some cases to prepare.
And here's the last question. It's a two-in-one, so it's a loaded one. What gives a host community / institution competitive advantage within the bid process, and who are the decision makers for selection?
Okay. So let me answer the second part first. So those sport committees that I talked about, they are ultimately the decision maker, working with the champ manager. So what the champ manager is going to do, obviously, is your day-to-day liaison, right? It's kind of help you through the bid process, um, and they're going to make sure that every bid that's been submitted, is it complete? Is there something that's just so out of whack, right? And hopefully they've worked with you on that, that it's really not a realistic option. Let me pick on our friends in Hawaii, for example. I had, as I mentioned, I had men's volleyball. Um, we went out to bid here probably 10 or 12 years ago, and the two largest attended men's volleyball championships were in Hawaii, and they bid, and they do a great job. They're passionate about that sport on the island. So, but I went to my senior leadership and said, look, Hawaii's in the mix. Committee likes them. They've done a great job. Is that a realistic location? And this was right around when you get like 08, 09, when the economy had gotten, a little questionable. So something like that can kind of take a bit out of the equation, but that's to the extreme. At the end of the day, it'll be that sports committee. So it's typically going to be, let's say, 4 to 8 people, depending on the size of the committee, that will review all of those bids, and then make those selections. Um,
Awesome.
I'm sorry, Will. What was the first part? What makes them stand out? Was that in the mix? I don't want to leave that part.
Oh yeah, what gives a community competitive advantage within the bid selection process?
The one slide I referenced, obviously your facilities, all of those things I think make you stand out. Um, you know, really stressing how important it is to you to host an NCAA championship, right? And I know you guys are bidding on a lot of things, right? A lot of groups, but everybody wants to feel special, right? Like when we come to town, we want to know that. So, things that you can demonstrate you've done with other groups, demonstrate your past successes, right? Other groups, maybe you've hosted a national governing body, maybe you've hosted an Olympic trials, those types of things. We didn't really touch on it on too much. If you have a grant program in your community, adding that in there, and by all means, I don't want to discourage anybody. It's like, hey, we don't have a grant program. That is really a small piece of that, but it can be part of your bid, to say, hey, look, hey, we'll, either, hey, we've got a cash contribution we can make, or we'll cover the venue rental, or we'll cover. We've got some great restaurant partners that'll cater your banquet. Those types of things, can really help. And then working with your champ manager, making sure that those are highlighted. And that's one thing that I tried to assist with as well. Is you know a lot of bids are coming in. There's a lot of information. The NCAA bid portal isn't, super user friendly, so making sure that you're able to highlight those things, after the fact. Um, Will and I've kicked this around. We do have groups that come to Indianapolis, and maybe come to the office, and hey, we'd love to meet with some of the champ managers, or maybe they'll host maybe a happy hour. And Nancy is very, very careful of walking the line with things like that, right? I definitely would encourage you to not bring gifts and things like that. But we do have organizations that come to Indy, and hey, we're gonna have a happy hour, from 5 to 6:30. We'd love to have some champ managers come by, and maybe you're doing other business, right? We still have some national governing bodies here in Indy. There's some other organizations, kind of rolling them all together. But anything you can do to kind of continue to cultivate, or create that relationship is always a big help. People like to do business with friends, right? And I think that's one way to do that, is try to get that personal connection.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Russ. Do you all see the PowerPoint?
Yeah, sure do.
Okay, awesome. So for everyone on the call, please communicate with Russ. Take a screenshot of this page. Um, if you have any additional questions, please reach out directly to him. Russ, we're going to commit to seeing you in Indianapolis soon in the coming year. So be ready. Louisiana is going to put on a show.
I
And
hope so, guys.
Awesome, awesome. And we definitely want to thank you for being our featured guest today and giving us a wealth of knowledge for, hosting NCAA bids and events and submitting bids and all that good stuff. So thank you so much for that.
Will, it was
And I
my
do want to
pleasure.
thank, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. And then I also want to thank all of our participants. Thank you for the folks who asked those great questions. And again, please take a screenshot of the current page and tune into additional webinars that will come in the future. Thank you all.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Russ.
Thanks, guys. My pleasure.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Jeff.